I got sentenced for probably a little more than 10 years. I did attempted escape in the county. I did all that.
You really tried to escape, man?
Yeah. People think you can't do it, but it was capable. You gotta go from the 10th floor to the hospital floor. After the 6th floor, you gotta jump on the well-fitted roof. And then, it was well thought out. I was in the mindset the catching come from the hanging. And I might make you catch me again. So,
Wow.
I've always been a rock and roll type of guy.
I got you.
African American males are locked up more than anybody else in this country. There's more African American males actually locked up than there are free right now in our country. And it's something that has to give. Even when you get out of jail, there's a thing called collateral sanctions that follows you for the rest of your life. So when they say you free, you served your time, did you really?
Life? What the hell you mean? Like, hell no, I ain't doing no life. I'm going back to my cell. It's a myth.
Hey, I want to welcome you back to another episode of Strategic Moves. I'm your host, Ken Dow. Today, we're going to talk to a good friend of mine who I went to high school with. His name is Mr. Fred Ward. Fred Ward runs a nonprofit organization right here in Cleveland, and he's going to talk to us today about rehabilitation. He's part of our series that we're having here on Brother, Can We Talk? And Fred Ward is going to kick off our series today by talking about rehabilitation. He's going to share his story with you, some of the stuff he went through in his life, and he's going to talk about collateral sanctions and how right now he's fighting across the state of Ohio to try to make sure that brothers who say they're free, and sisters, and anyone who say that they're free, are truly free.
This is Strategic Moves with Ken Dow.
I'm gonna be honest with you, man. Growing up, Fred, I ain't never think I'd be sitting across the table from you talking to you about any of the stuff that we're talking about today, man, because you was a rude boy. Growing up, brother.
God do it.
And I don't even think people even understand the magnitude of what that really means. Some guys out here call themselves the guy, the man, the dude out there to get it done in the streets. But Fred Ward actually was that guy. Only two people in Glenville, when I think about growing up in our community, I could say honestly ran the streets. There's a guy by the name of Alvin Elder. Everybody know him as Big Man.
Oh, big. I ran across him. I got a story about him.
Yeah, everybody know Big Man. And what's crazy is I had the opportunity to go into school with all this. Big Man, I remember him walking to the kindergarten. Me and him was in actually kindergarten together.
Wow.
And he walked in, and I remember everybody looking at him like, my God, we thought he was a big man from the beginning of birth, I believe,
Right.
Oh, man, I mean, Big Man, and then it was Fred Ward.
Cross paths, too. That's so funny.
Y'all did?
We did.
Yeah.
I never forget, it was a bar. So on my heyday, I had a group of guys. We was in Cicero's bar.
Mm-hmm.
I was on one side, they had two sides, the dance floor, and another side just for the libations. And one of my guys came around to me, had this old weird look on his face. I'm like, man, what's wrong with you? He's like, man, dude just robbed him. And I'm like, robbed you of what? And he took his chain, right?
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't believe somebody even thought to do that. So I went on the other side, it was Big Man. So I went up to Big Man, and I let Big Man know, this guy, he's a friend of mine, and you're going to need to return that chain. He just took off his neck. He looked at me, and he kind of realized, the tables wasn't necessarily on his side, and he gave it back to me. But I just thought, the audacity of this dude, right?
Oh, yeah.
To do that, right?
Exactly.
He was in there, we was mob deep. Yeah, but after that, we gained a mutual understanding of do whatever you're going to do, but make sure it don't cross lines.
Remarkably, because I never heard of any incidents of you guys having it. I remember he used to go on the block, man. And back then, he didn't even have no weapons or nothing, man. He'd just go strong arm and just take everything he wanted.
It was actually him, and there was a couple others that was with him. They was all dangerous, but I was up and coming, and it was a situation where they respected the fact that I would take it that next level if need be. It was very early on respect across the board.
So let's talk about Fred. So you grew up in Glenville. Just tell me about what part of Glenville, and you're coming up.
So it's so interesting because a lot of people argue where I grew up at. And I was born on 119th and Superior. And when I was 3 months old, the Glenville riots happened, and my mother actually moved me from there. I mean, left the furniture and everything. She tanks coming down the street, and we moved over on Cedar, 90th and Cedar.
Okay.
My grandparents stayed on 90th and Cedar, so we stayed over there with them for a while. And I even stayed for a short time down in Longwood. So my mother said triple homicide happened at the store across from our apartments, and she got out of there. But for the most part, I grew up on Cedar, and then when I was about maybe 13, my mother remarried, and I ended up on Remington on 105.
Okay.
Right? And so that's what ended up getting me to Joseph Gallagher and then Lincoln West.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
So
All right. So that's how you ended up on
that
that.
was how I ended up on
Oh.
through marriage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't actually grow up in that Glenville community. And that was kind of wild because like Big Man was the guy in that community of where we were in that part of Glenville. And then when we did go to Lincoln West, it did expose us to everybody else because then you start seeing brothers from St. Clair, brothers from everywhere that you kind of knew they were there, but you know, they were there and you were over there kind of thing. And then you had to start to intermingle. So along that lines, I think I read in your book, you said you grew up Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah. I grew up Jehovah's Witness. That was, to me, from a traumatic experience from my mom. The story to me that my father had been incarcerated, old man's field, never wanted to go back, ended up catching another case and left Cleveland and went to New York. And so while he was in New York, I was very young. The communication stopped. And so my mom put out a missing person. And at some point, they called her and it was like, we think we might have found him. This particular person was buried already 6 months under John Doe. And so she went to New York. She loved this man, me and my sister's father. And so when she went to New York, she was so outdone and hurt. She came back from New York after identifying that it was him and instantly became a Jehovah's Witness. You know, I tell her to this day, I think she came Jehovah's Witness because Jehovah's Witness had this thing about, you know, lions and the lambs can play together. You wouldn't have to lock your door. There's great tribulation.
I got you.
I think she needed that in her life at the time. So she pulled me and my sister right in there with her. I grew up Jehovah's Witness, questioning God most of the time. Why we in all this poverty? You know, but it was an interesting experience.
So then as that you start to transition and you go to Lincoln West, we went there, and Lincoln West, as I tell everybody, man, was a real trip. You know, you had to really have your together. The beginning of that year of transitioning and going to school, getting up early in the morning and all the stuff that you had to do in order to get that done. As you started going through that, the drug game started happening early, and we talking late 80s going into the early 90s. How did you fall into that gap, Fred?
Well, yeah. So you know what? It was really organic. I realized we was very poor very early on in my life. To the point, because my mother was the type of mother that she cried about everything. We was very aware of challenges and struggles that she faced financially. And so I felt like a man child. And I always thought that money was the source of happiness because every time my mother was unhappy, it was because she had no money. And so because I loved her more than anything else on planet Earth, I always wanted to see how could I do it. I started off cutting hair through the neighborhood and cutting grass. It just never really amounted to the type of money I needed to kind of ground set her in happiness. I'll never forget this one day. I was at Floor basketball court and I was playing basketball. Thought I was pretty good. And this particular day was switching hot. When I got finished playing, I didn't have a dime in my pocket. I looked over there with some guys sitting on top of a Nova. They was drinking like some cold 40 ounces. At the time, economies. Cold as beer.
Right.
He was genius to put the beer in the freezer, then put it in the cooler, right? And I'm looking at them drinking that beer. Even though I was still a teen, it was cold. And I knew it was cold. So I would have drunk beer, water, juice, but I didn't have a dime. And so I left there thinking like that, I ain't got money to buy a pop. I walked up to 105, and when I went over there, Rod C. and Billy May, they was there.
I forgot about him.
They had all the accolades of the era.
Yes, right.
They had the big gold Ron DMT chains and scooters. And so he was arguing with a guy, and he was like, Fred, you know what? I'll give you $100 if you beat this guy up. And, you know, truthfully, I didn't even know if I could beat the guy, but the $100 was so compelling for me, right? I was like, shoot, I'm going to shoot my shot. So I just attacked the guy. And at some point, they was like, okay, Fred, you know what? Lighten up, you're going to kill this guy. And I never forget in my mind, I was like, you better not be playing with me about that $100. He pulled out a big old knot, $100. He had probably about $5,000. He gave me $100. I went in the store. It was like yesterday. I bought a Reese cup, a pop, bag of chips. Guy gave me like $98 and some change. And when I got home, I gave my mother $50. And she was like, boy, where you get this money from? But at the same time, she was asking me where I got the money from. She was reaching for it, right? And when she accepted that money, it made me feel good. And I'll never forget the next day when I got out of school, I was like, I'm going to go up on this block and see if I can get another $100. I was willing to go up there and do bodily harm, you know, for that $100 so I could go back home and give her some more money. you know, and so that led to them saying, wow, this dude, not only is he fearless, but I always had a sense of loyalty, some loyalty to a default. And so they start introducing me to like, these guys gonna sell drugs and you just watch their back, you know? And so I used to do that after school or to the morning time. Sometimes it got to the point where I was doing it and going to school from the block.
Wow.
It was crazy though. They was making like $11,000 a night. I was getting paid like $300 a week. But to me, as a kid, that was money. Then I got all the perks because, you know, crackheads, they selling chains and necklaces. I'm getting all the little extra teas. Yeah, so that's how I actually got introduced to like the elite life.
So let's talk about that time in that community, man, because, you know, that was some really, really terrible times in our community. And there's two sides to all of that. Just like you said, that's your side of it. And you had all the rights to feel the way that you feel, to have to do what you had to do, you know, because like you said, nobody taking care of you but you.
Right.
I was the same way. I grew up with my grandmother, and I was always put in the position that, hey, you the man of the house. It was just my grandmother and a bunch of women. I always grew up around a bunch of women. I was always the guy, and it was either 3 or 4. She had 3 daughters, and they all had daughters. So it was like I was the only guy. So everything that broke, everything that had to be fixed, I had to fix. Or if, like you say, those sad times when stuff was really, really bad and they at home really going through it, you know, you trying to figure out what can you do as a man.
As a boy,
trying to be a man because they always telling you that you the man, right? And you have to protect us. I was the same way. I ended up dropping out of school doing the same thing. I just went and got a job because I just didn't want to do the drug thing. You know what I mean? And I felt I was smart enough to talk my way into getting big money from a job, and ended up falling through the streets in a different way. But I understand that. So let's talk about those times. Tell me about some of the parts of going through there. You remember one of the worst times of that situation you could talk about?
I had a religious background, but then I also had a very traumatic childhood too. So there was a lot of things that, as these things were happening, I didn't realize that were internalized in me, right? But I will say that it never sat well with me when I seen young women more than anything. I don't think I had so much of an emotional connection with males that were substance abusers as young women, because I guess I seen women go from being just a nice girl to like a crackhead. That's a heck of a transition. To see somebody entire makeup change, like based on drug addiction, right? And it never felt well with me. It was even times when I think I wouldn't even allow guys that sold drugs that I monitored to even sell certain people drugs. I had this weird morality in the midst of trying to like
Rationalize that.
come up out of this in-depth poverty through this avenue. Illegal game. But again, another thing that I did learn, so in talking to you, I have to think back, because some of the things that I learned, I didn't learn while I was in it. I learned as a result of sitting down from it, right? I didn't know that I had the trauma that had been inflicted on me in my own life, that I lack empathy. And that I had a propensity for violence where the streets label, you know, gangsterism. I realized later on in my life that it was only dysfunctionalism, right? But the streets didn't label it that way, you know. I was the kid that got tied up and whooped at 10 years old, because in my mind, I grabbed the belt, I run through the house, I get in the closet, get under the bed. So me being tied to a chair was never like, this is just wrong, or how did it affect me? I just thought it was my fault. That's one of the problems of trauma, right? Internalizing it as your own guilt, right? And so when I got 14, 15, older men, grown-ups messed up, caused a crack addiction and messed up money, I tied them up. And I thought in my mind that it was just, I got punished for everything I did. This is a natural course to punish you for everything you did. And some things was punishable more severely than others. This is how I had been conditioned, right, in my own life to hurt people, right? I had a philosophy and a rationale that interacted with my act. And that's why I'm so involved with at-risk youth and people that join gangs and stuff like that. I'm always asking them the why. How did you get to think in this way and act in this way? And I'm going to tell you, on a consistent basis, I have found that when I build enough trust and confidence in them for them to travel back and take me with them, find seed of trauma and pain, violations that have reshaped the way they think about them and show up in it. So I'm really an advocate for public health, understanding the need for public safety. I think that a lot of the situations that face violence and despair is rooted in a real thing. And I think sometimes you have to find ways to unpack it question and open doors that you have in so many ways in your life have locked and bolted shut. You know, I think that's part of a healing process that even today I try to consistently have involved.
Here goes a difficult one for you also. Because of your work that you're doing now and you're in the community, I was at your place a week ago when we were talking. You were in a room with two other gentlemen and you had another gentleman who was out there. And I was telling somebody when I left there was like, you know, I really feel for the fact that you're in this position where everybody's pulling on you. I'm like, that's a heavy, heavy burden. How do you weigh that?
Yeah. So, you know, I used to have to say the world syndrome. I really did. I used to think in terms that I felt my will was strong enough to change the course and reality of even a person as they were in real time. And I learned the hard way that when you see something, regardless of how much you want to change it, you at least have to acknowledge what you see.
Okay.
And so for me, I'm always saying the duty is ours, results are God's. But I try to, through my own awakening, allow people to move out of the debilitating that a lot of us have accepted in our own empowerment, right? And I charge them to think different, right, about how they see themselves in the world. And so education and knowledge is one of my primary go-tos when I'm dealing with an individual to understand themselves and what they've been through, and then be able to get a very clear and concise understanding of what systems look like. I think that systems in the navigation of them, they need to be understood too. I often use that when it comes to relationships between politicians and residents. How more often than not, a person might want to play some type of political role and they come to the table as an advocate for the constituents they serve. But at some point, because they have the allocation of funds, federal, state, county, I think sometimes they deify them. They delude or delude themselves from thinking that this money was allocated as a resource to the people for the upliftment of society or city. And they start thinking that it's their money and that they have the sole right to decide like where it goes and who it go to. And on the flip side, a lot of residents also play a role because they forget that if you get a grant or you get some money that probably for a serve, right, that you're supposed to be doing to the community and not a personal relationship between you and, you know, a politician. And sometimes because of that muddy water, I find that they feel like it's more to appease the person than it is to do the work, right? And I think that could be fixed. I think that it spreads throughout all aspects of our culture, even with voting, low propensity of voting. I think that we have a civic duty to educate residents on the accountability and responsibility of the vote. Right. And in doing that, it makes us accountable, or it makes people that's in power or in position accountable to the people. But I think because people don't want to be accountable to the people, they keep the people uneducated as to how the system is set up.
So I want to go back a little bit. I want to go back to the old Fred for a minute. And the reason why I want to go back to the old Fred is because the old Fred wasn't thinking like this. That's the transition. The old Fred, when did the old Fred get caught? How much time did you do?
I got caught in 1988. I did 10 years. I came home November 15, 1999. I've been home 23 years without incident.
You got sentenced for 10 years when you went?
I got sentenced for probably a little more than 10 years. I did attempted escape in the county. You know, I did all that.
You really tried to escape, man?
Yeah. People think you can't do it, but it was capable. You gotta go from the 10th floor to the hospital floor. After the 6th floor, you gotta jump on the welfare roof. And then, you know, it was well thought out. You know, I was in the mindset the catching come from the hanging. And I might make you catch me again, you know. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I've always been a rock and roll type of guy.
I got you.
You know, so after I was caught, I got so far from my humanity. I needed time just to try to figure out how did I get so dark, so far from my spirituality. And then I had to accept the fact that in my bad leadership, I lost friends that was following me down this dark road that didn't have the capacity or the propensity to do the type of violence and harm and lost their lives in the process. My bad leadership was the fact that I used to think that as long as you know what you're signing up for, then it's okay. But I don't think like that now. I think that a good leader is one that understands strengths and weaknesses or challenges of those around them. And to be able to place them in a situation that's most conducive for their growth and development is what leadership is about.
So when did it start to click for you?
probably about 3-4 years when I was incarcerated. I was the guy that didn't watch TV. I wouldn't have a TV in my cell. I wasn't worried what they was doing at Vales, and I ain't need you to send me pictures inside. I did 10 years working on me. I needed to unpack, right, things that had been conditioned into my way of being and thinking. I spent 10 years really like trying to understand the why and effects of it. And so it was probably one of the best 10 years of my life. I got to realize the levels of conditioning. And also it helped. One of the things that was a turning point for me was I was in the hole for about a year at one time.
Really?
Yeah. I was still doing illegal stuff. And I had a CO go get some things. He came in, didn't pay it. And we was going to actually do some bodily harm to this guy. And he was so scared, he told on himself. And they came and got me. And I ended up in the hole for a year. But I feel like I had guardian angels all my life. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. So I'm in the hole, Tutus in Rwanda, in war. And so at the time, I'm thinking it's black and white. This is all, it's black versus white because there's a lot of racism inside the institution. And I seen this black on black genocide. And I'm talking about, they killed like 800 people, like less than 6 months, 800,000. And Newsweek was very explicit about showing this. So I'm sitting in the hole and they steady sending these Newsweeks in there. And I'm watching just black on black crime at its most evil level. And it did something to me when I was in it. It made me vow that I ain't about to hurt another brother. Not me. I'm not going to be used in that way. My life going to have to really be in jeopardy for me to act. You know what I'm saying? I ain't about to justify harming a brother because, he owed me money or, he disrespected me or he said something he shouldn't have said. No, I didn't have that in. I just started realizing that there's more to life than the trauma and the drama. And so I acted on those new principles for the remainder of my time inside. I was an avid reader, read a lot, ran the college campus. I was sending pads for dudes to go to college that didn't even have to. I'm signing people up to go to school. So they took it away. The Pell Grants, they took it away, and I just couldn't understand that. Why not let us learn? Some legislator was like, they going to college and school, they don't need that in there. I'm like, that's stupid. But I didn't have a political understanding at the time that some politicians and legislators passed stupid laws.
Wow. That's the best place to educate somebody.
Yeah, I did that and I came home. And I had another awakening because when I came home, I knew that I was through with living a criminal life, but I didn't know that I was condemned to a certain subpar existence as a citizen. And so I'm thinking, shoot, long as I don't do nothing illegal, I'm going to pursue my American dream. Shoot, I think I really still had a mindset of a capitalist. I'm a capitalist still. I go out here, I'm about to, I got a good name, I'm strong. I'm about to pursue my American dream, and I'm opening up nightclubs, clubs, gentlemen clubs, I'm doing everything. And I never forget, I did it in a neighborhood that went really well. I made a lot of money. Then I said, I'm going downtown. I went downtown, and I never forget, in the process of trying to do business downtown in the entertainment world, it was a letter came, right, saying that the known ex-felon by the name of Fred Ward shouldn't own or operate this business. I'm like, first of all, the first thing struck me was they called me a felon, but they called me my name. And I'm like, I got a right to this, I got a right to that. And I swear, Ken, I did 10 years incarcerated, read every single thing I possibly could, ran to college, and I did not know about the 13th Amendment. I did not know that neither slavery nor voluntary servitude was legal unless you was duly convicted. I was like, what is this? And when I really found out the magnitude and severity of what it was, I was like, man, it just took the wind out of me. I'm like, I'm a modern day slave.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't have restored citizenship. My rights have been took forever. And I ran across collateral sanctions and collateral consequence. And I'm going to tell you, that set me back because I was arguing, I got a right to this. I got a right to do business. I got a right to be a businessman. And I was wrong. And
wrong in the fact that you don't have a right?
I was wrong in the fact that slavery was never abolished in America and that people with felony convictions inherited the legacy of slavery. Beyond the new Jim Crow, beyond the movie The 13th, that people with felony convictions, not only in the state of Ohio, which consists of 1.9 million people, but the country, that America never weaned itself off slavery. It just reframed it. for those that was duly convicted. And collateral sanctions was the new black codes. And the Correctional Corporation of America and prison industrial complex was the convict leasing. And it became all clear to me like, wow.
So Fred, we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about this collateral sanctions and the stuff that you're doing now. I know this is your new thing and you really excited about it because we talked a little bit about it and you light up every time you find out. It's like almost like you done found the golden ticket, the holy grail. Give our audience and our listening folks out there exactly what that is and what you're doing about that.
So collateral sanctions as well as collateral consequences, one thing I found that most people didn't know what it was. It's the extended barriers that a person with a felony conviction faces after they done completed their fines, fees, probation, or incarceration sentence time. So after you done completed all your court requirements, because you have a felony, it lasts for the rest of your life. So what I'm saying is that you can have an 18-year-old male or female that in a young, naive state commit a felony or cop to one. You don't have to be incarcerated. You could just go in there, they overcharge you, and you're 18, you can go home today if you just plead to this felony, and they just want to go home. They plead, 18 years old, 35, 40 years old, they apply to be a nurse, can't be a nurse because you got a felony on your record, can't, hazardous materials in the construction field, certain licenses, certain insurances you can't have, you understand? And it's 1,100 collateral sanctions in Ohio alone that stop people from being able to have full agency and participate in society as a whole citizen.
1,100.
1,100.
Wow. What are some of the more popular ones?
Well, I got one. I've been home 22 years without incident. I work with the courts, the city, the county, juvenile detention center, and through my relationship with the county land bank, I applied. I'm not only doing transitional housing, but I applied for the license. Me and two other people paid for it, went through the entire course, and at the end of the course, they say, "Hey, Fred, if you got a felony on your record, you can't get a license in your name, but I can get you through the back door." Well, I'm the type of person that don't want to go through the back door.
Right.
I want to go to the front door. I got to fight that. I talked to some people. Ohio got community health. I get a call, "Hey, Fred, we got some guys that want to take classes to be a community health worker. Oh, by the way, they can't be certified because they got a felony." I said, "What? I got to fight that." I find out in Alabama, you can be a community health worker and have a felony, but in Ohio, you can't. I got to fight that too. It's just on and on and on and on. And it's criminal. And a lot of people don't know it exists. A lot of people might think that they just lazy. They just don't want to work. But in many cases, that's not the case. You go in them hospital systems and you see a lot of them brothers and sisters and white folks too. They got felonies just as much as you see them and you might say, "Oh, Dad, she looked like a nurse. She looked like she's got as much knowledge of a nurse, but she ain't a nurse."
Right.
She one of them other names that get 1/3 of the pay.
Right.
And it's probably because they got a felony and they just can't pursue their education.
Go to that next level.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's criminal.
So let me ask you, you say you're now using this program and you're going around the state of Ohio with this?
Yeah, I got to educate Ohio because I tell people all the time, we need numbers. There's a certain amount of numbers we need. So we have to educate Ohio. And the good thing about it is that there are many individuals outside of African Americans and Latinos that have felonies. Most people live in shame with their felonies because they never went to jail.
Right.
So they get the felony because they done copped out to something they done did, work their way through certain jobs, probably working twice as hard,
Right.
being underpaid, but they done worked there 20, 30 years. They ain't telling nobody they got a felony because they feel shame.
Right.
Right? But the truth of the matter is you need to be fighting that because it ain't right. That's a real thing.
So let's go into some neighborhood stuff. Talk about what's going on because you're right there on the ground, Fred. You're dealing with this every day. What is really going on in these streets these days, man? All the killings, the shootings, where they getting all these guns from, man? And what's happening on the streets?
Glad you asked. I'm always focused on the why. We can put a gun on the middle of this table. And do I think that there's too many guns and they too accessible? I do. But we can put a gun on that table. It'll sit there for the next 15 years without harming either one of you. Right? I focus on individual accountability, also being aware of strategic theories that people exploit us with. Why the drama? Why the violence? Why the gangs? Why the killing? This is not a hard answer. It's an undergird to collateral sanctions and collateral consequences. They call it civil death. Now, civil death is the total exclusion or partial exclusion from a person being able to participate in civic life. Now you're talking about ostracized and excluded. The undertone of civil death is another really interesting term called outlawry. So watch how this play out. They collateral sanctionalize you. You get a felony. You get handed a collateral sanction, a collateral consequence, which is barring you from being able to be a full citizen. Then they condemn you to civil death, which will explain why you got low propensity voters and people don't feel like they need to vote because they totally disengage from the voting process because they cannot fully participate in civic life. So why do they participate in the process? Here we go. And then up under that, they label you an outlaw. They condemn you to be an outlaw and then call you one. And then we ask ourselves, why is people moving into these underground mentalities, right? And let me give you the science. A guy named Durkheim, a criminologist. He said that at the turn of the century, the social contract in America wasn't really established. So as they was migrating over to America, they was trying to figure out how this thing go. And they created a thing called enemy, right? So another guy, he said enemy. Okay, enemy is something like stress, right? And so another guy after him came named Merton. And he said, okay, I understand enemy, but enemy is actually what we call strain theory. But this is what I found more interesting than anything. Merton said that the presupposition for crime and deviance in America was the American dream. And he said the reason why the American dream is the presupposition of crime and deviance is because at the inception of the American dream concept, they knew that there would be populations of people that wouldn't have access to what was the presupposition of the American dream, which was a good job, good education. They knew at the time of the inception of it, that there would be populations of people that wouldn't have access to a good job and a good education, but still believe in the American dream. And because they believed in the American dream with no possible ways and means to achieve it, they would do it by hook or crook, by any means necessary, which is the creation of the underworld, which is the creation of a subset society and standard, you understand, for those that don't feel that society will accept them or has excluded them and ostracized them. They create their own way and it turn in on itself. Imagine that.
And that's what our issues is today and that is not just with we want to blame it on the young people and say the young community, but it ain't just them. It's like you say, it's a combination of all of that, which institute the lawlessness. At the end of the day, that's what you have in your community right now is lawlessness that's running through there. You even have a police department, don't even have enough police officers to be able to deal with the lawlessness in the community, which added to that. Right, so it's not like this has been going on for a while, and it's not like it just happened, and we can't just blame it on a group of young people saying, "Oh, all the young people got guns." Well, they got guns because they feel they need protection.
Oh yeah,
because they're out there in the streets, and I'm not justifying it, but like you say, it is a street mentality, and there's a street life that is being lived, and there's an under way of living in the city that, whether people want to believe it or not, exists.
Absolutely. And then, when you start looking at these two narratives, public safety versus public health, you start looking at community trauma. And I say community trauma is when I leave out my house and it's an issue of safety, right? If I leave out my house and I feel like I need a weapon to go to the gas station, or I'm not going to go to the gas station in the neighborhood, I'm going to go way out in the heights because I'm nervous and scared, that's traumatic too. So let's see how this trauma play out. We got trauma in the home, birth to 18. Then you got community trauma once you step off the porch. And then you got institutional trauma because we got some people that's in positions to deify themselves. First, they pay themselves $200,000-300,000. Then they, understand, they become judge and juror to the people that's coming to these seats for help. And they get treated and they get turned away because they like, I came for help. And this person that treated me so crazy and talked so crazy to me, I'm traumatized from just the system itself. Where do we go from here?
That's the question. That's what everybody's trying to figure out. Where do we go from here? How do you fix it? What's next?
What's next is the new way of thinking about philanthropy. A new way of thinking about how we understand the current mode is that you got the do-gooders. You got people that want to do good. They've been pretty successful. And they say, you know what, I want to do good. I got too much money. I got more than enough for me and my family. So I'm going to get this money to the foundations. The foundations say, you know what, we're going to get some smaller nonprofit. We're going to get this money to the CDCs. What I find is that a lot of times, you understand, the money don't make it to the ground. It don't get to the people that's doing the work They got trusted relationships amongst these neighborhoods, right? And so you got these thought leaders that have already disconnected from the people that actually do the work.
How you connect them?
The
Now
great-
look, me and you both been around long enough. We supposed to be smart individuals. We know street as well as both.
Yeah,
So I guess everybody will ask us the question, Fred, what we do, how we fix
I
that.
got the answer.
Okay.
It's called shared governance.
Okay.
It's called shared governance. It's called accountability and responsibility across the board. And in order to do that, you got to be willing to educate the people on how the system, how the money move, right? Problem. But see, people don't want they don't want that table to exist, because when you put that table together, that means you have to be accountable to each other. You have to be accountable. You can't just put the money on the table.
So-
You can't just do the program.
So let's break that down a little bit more.
Okay.
I want to break it down a little bit more. We don't have to use names, but let's use positions. When you say bring them all to the table, who needs to be?
Well, who need to be the people that do the work? In organizing, we talk about organized people and organized money.
Right.
We need organized money at the table, and we need organized people, right? People that have the trusted relationship of the perpetrators and the people that's on the ground, it's a bunch of buffers. We got 1,000 buffers, and every time you get a buffer, you get another salary. So if you start off with $10 million, by the time the buffers take $250 a piece, all you got is a book bag, maybe a bike, and a box lunch.
So you're saying it should be straight up community, straight talking to the people who write the checks. Bottom line, what we're saying is when we say no buffers, there's no in between, guys. The organizations, the people who run the actual organization need to be talking with the folks who actually write the checks for those organizations without going through a third party, which is usually CCs or somewhere in that degree. And I'm not blaming community development organizations. We're just saying that maybe there should be more opportunities for because the community development organization is mainly in our community. And I only can speak from my experience, and it could be better, more to it. But for the most part, what they're doing is being a vehicle for government to be able to get some projects done that they can say that they're doing. And they also are there as a buffer for organizations like yours and others to say that, these organizations exist in the community, and if we want to do some work with them, they have to work through us to get that done, and we'll make sure that this organization get that. And that sometimes can be a buffer, is what we're saying.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful, because I'm a firm believer that you can't fight for the future if you don't believe that the future holds something greater than the present, right? So I'm always trying to inspire people. Sometimes it got to get very dark before the light is even appreciated. Funders are about to get tired. People that have money that they want to donate, they're going to get tired, because guess what? Change is not happening. And we're going to have to move out of status quo and business as usual, because business as usual ain't producing no concrete results. We're a decade, 165 murders a year, you understand, for the last decade. That's like killing a small school every year.
Right, exactly.
And I just think that at some point, people that have organized money, they're going to say, you know what, I'm tired of just giving this money away and not seeing no change.
And that's another issue. Do you think there's too many duplicate organizations that's getting the same amount of resources to do the same thing?
We know that we only have a certain amount of CDCs. CDCs, by definition, supposed to do certain things. Right? We got a lot of nonprofits, but my thing is, let your work show. And I'm not saying cut out the middleman, right? I'm saying, because the middleman probably got a certain level of academia understanding.
No, understanding, right?
But I'm saying that we have to understand who are intellectual partners, and we got to also understand who are the workhorse.
Well, and I guess what we're saying is, again, I believe in community. There's organizations just like yours that started out in the community at one place that's in a totally different place that it is right now. And over the years that you have shown that by working in the community and doing the stuff in the community to get that. I believe that government as well as the funders that we talk about, has an obligation when they talk about community to not just continue to send those dollars down the same rabbit hole year after year through the same PCs, nonprofits, whatever the hell you want to call it. I think they need to take more opportunity to work with organizations like yours that's growing, not in the aspect of saying we got a $10,000 grant for you that we put out every 6 months, and 100 of you guys need to apply for it, and you going up against the woman who want to do a program for some little kids on the street. You know, both programs are effective, but that's who we're up against. Okay. It should be an opportunity for organizations like yours to be able to get other and bigger opportunities to do exactly what you want to do with your building that you want to build over there, you know?
Demonstration project. Let me say this, like, I often think of like this wormhole that I was able to go through, and it's only through the grace of God and the ancestors, right? And Pacific people, you know what I'm saying? That helped me, right? Cause I mean, the work that I'm doing, I could have never did it without certain organizations holding my hand. United Black Fund held my hand.
Correct.
They gave me somebody to help me take these wonderful thoughts and put them on paper. You know what I'm saying? I salute them. Cleveland Foundation held my hand. You know what I'm saying? Pastor Rowan held my whole body. You know what I'm saying? I have been mentored, right? And handheld in many ways that, got me to the point where they say, we might have to acknowledge this group, this nonprofit, because they got 6, 7 programs going on with no funding, no operation budget. How is this possible? Again, grace of God.
So, Fred, let's talk about your nonprofit. As we rounding home here, let's talk about your nonprofit and what you're doing there, and the new building. You want to build a new facility there, right there on 105 and St. Clair there. There's going to be a place for restaurants, and moving your nonprofit there, and a place for students to go to after school and during the day to, that kid who need that understanding of maybe not going up on the block to maybe be able to just go sit over there and talk to Fred instead, So with that being, tell us a little bit about your name of your nonprofit, the stuff you guys doing over there and all of that.
Yeah, so all this come about me just graced to sit at some very large tables and really see how the nonprofit and the private sector and the public sector interact with each other. Right. The name of the building is called the Miracle Mile Project. And the reason why it's a miracle mile, I got it from a dear friend of mine, right? Yeah, and his name will be revealed, you understand, when we get to doing this build. But he was the first person that said, you know what, I love the idea, and I ain't gonna talk to you about it. I'm gonna invest $250,000, you understand, because I believe in it, right? So that's how you see them blueprints and rendering. I told a friend of mine about the project, and he immediately, you understand, said, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is, right? And he named it the Miracle Mile because our concept is that within that mile radius, we turn blight and despair to something that's health and healing, right? We create 3 different food sources. We create, you understand, access where the community don't feel like they disengaged. They can come in there. The school kids gonna come. I know for a fact, because we already trusted members in the community, that when this building get built, the community is gonna be an anchor for that neighborhood. And it's gonna start a process of where we start turning that neighborhood back into a right, without the the negative connotation of, oh, it's gentrification, right? Because it ain't gonna be. And this is unaccessible to us because it won't be, right? And so it's divine.
It's for youth opportunity.
It's for everybody, it's for everybody to be able to cross generational their talents and resources and accessibility, right? And I've always been a learn, teach type of person. So when I know Cleveland is cash heavy. We ain't got no shortage of money in Cleveland, period. I know that. And I also know that there are people that have money that want to see some real results in this city that they care about, right? And then I also know that we have challenges, we have problems. So when I see 105 and I see a building that, needs a lot of TLC, I see buildings gutted to the studs and $2, $3, $4 million put into it. So I'm like, this bill is worthy of an investment. Why? Because it would inspire and motivate the community. Because, you know what I'm saying, it'll be a counter to just everyone thinking that a new building is gentrification, something that is in your neighborhood, but not accessible to you, right? We don't have a sit-down restaurant on 105, which we need one. We need food sources. They say we're in a food desert. So all I'm doing is being a mirror image of what's possible, right?
The name of your organization is
Kanimu
Kanimu.
Foundation, doing business at the Kanimu Lighthouse Center on 105. We shine light in the darkest of places, and we become a beacon of light. The symbol of a lighthouse is when you weary and you feel like all is lost, come on in, and we're going to access you to resources. We're going to lift you up. We're going to let you know that you have value, irregardless of what type of rough time and life you done live, you still have value. So our greatest investment, we believe, is in people.
And you also have your political action committee. You have a PAC, FinPAC.
I modified it because that was just for formerly incarcerated individuals. My lens is bigger now.
Okay.
So, you know what I'm saying? The PAC now is for felony impacted individuals. That's the 1.9.
Okay.
See, with just felons, I was at about 800,000. I need that 1.9.
Now let's talk about that, because what Fred is doing, people just don't know. This man, he is a method to his madness. This brother has a PAC. It was called the FinPAC, which and nobody believed me. I'm doing a project with the county. And they asked me to do a series of community meetings for them because the county wants to build a new jail. And so our gig is to, put these meetings on. And it was so funny when I went back and told them, I said, I met with the gentleman who's the president of the FinPAC, and they like, the Fin. I said, the felons, they have a PAC. They was like, really? I was like, yeah, no, they serious. And they're serious. Like you said, they got 800 members. I mean, he got a serious PAC, and they're out there. So tell them about the PAC, man, a little bit about what you're doing with that.
So again, I have a spiritual background. So the PAC is symbolic of the whale, and the whale is symbolic of the story of Jonah. Because Jonah, so a lot of people that, have been in, they call themselves being in the belly of the beast. And so when we started thinking about Jonah, trying to run from his purpose in life, and not do what God had created him to do, he ended up in the belly of the beast. But over those 3 days, he was able to talk with God, and a lot of times people incarcerated, they get a lot of time to talk, and figure stuff out and find out where you went off and what went wrong, and so after he figured it out, he got spewed out his mouth, and he got on his purpose. So the whale has a couple different symbolic meanings. One is for individuals that have, been incarcerated, that have transformed their lives, and now they want to get to God's business, get to the business at hand, right? But also, just like you got the donkey, and you got the elephant, you got the whale. And if you don't do right by the people, and you get in there and abuse your power, you might get hit with the fin, which means that we will knock you out of office and take your power. So, that's the closed fist part of it.
And what's really strong about that, people, is that, again, Fred has been doing this FinPAC for a while, and he's been working with that, and it's been a local thing that he's been doing here. He's now moving it along to working with what he's doing with the actions now that he's doing that's going to open this up even bigger to take this PAC to be able to really start to make some changes and to get something done there. What I'd like to do, Fred, and we're getting ready to come to an end here, is I want to just ask you one last thing, and I want you to just speak to, you are part of this summit that we're doing a whole summit with African-American males, and wanted you to come in to really talk about rehabilitation and what it is to do that. And you definitely are someone who I know have shown how have shown the ability to rehabilitate themselves and reinvent themselves to what you are today, as well as you have a goal of not just doing it for yourself, but helping others along the way. So my thing is now that we're doing this thing on African American males, and I know that males are a huge part of what's going on in our community. There were some articles that wrote that Cleveland was the worst place to live. Cleveland was the most stressful place to live. It's the worst place for African American women. It's the worst place to live. And we own all of this worse on everything. But you know, one thing that I never noticed that was on there, they never do a study to say how it is for African American males. And I would like to believe if it's worse for African American women and we're worse on everything, then it has to be 10 times worse for African American males. So I just really wanted you to take a few moments to really talk about this thing that we can do to try to get through to the African American males in this community, man, to try to come together. We're going to try to do our event on the 21st of September, but in the interim on a working level. And if you could speak and I'm hoping, and my podcast is worldwide, so I'm hoping that somebody is going to pick up on this and what you got to say.
Yeah. So, the first thing I would say that when you're dealing with African American men, especially those that have been traumatized and are moving through criminal proclivities and just dysfunctional, habits, you can't be scared of them, right? And everybody ain't built to go to the front line, but that don't mean that it ain't some work for you. So I think that we have to, we got to show that we care, right? You gotta care first, right? And then you have to identify with them, right? And that's a certain group of individuals, right? Because everybody don't have the same talents, right? And I think that, we have to do a better job of highlighting stories of overcoming, stories of empowerment, because it's a lot of us that done been in similar spaces as our young brothers today. I just left the juvenile detention center yesterday because we want to build a relationship with them, right? In the midst of Cuyahoga County having the highest bond over of juveniles in the state of Ohio, right? We want to help with that, right? But when we come in there, we let them know like, hey, man, your story matters, and we got a story too. And about sharing and caring, right? And starting to unpack the trauma, right? And also mystifying, these taboos of like counseling, getting healing, men don't cry, toxic masculinity. We got to break through all of that because it was wrong. You know what I'm saying? And we survived off of being numb. But people become numb because they expect pain to come. That's why before they pull your teeth or do work in your mouth, they numb you, right? And so we gotta, we have to find a way to unthaw our young men. Because right now, in my opinion, I believe that they function from a state of numbness, right? And it's an art to being able to unthaw somebody that, is distrusting, have been hurt to levels that some of us can't even imagine. It's all hands on deck, but in all hands on deck, that don't mean everybody touch everything. That means you got to decide what's your level of skill and be honest with yourself. You know what I'm saying? Don't be pulling up on these young brothers in the darkness talking about, man, you don't know why you need to be over there. You might need to be making the coffee and all that. You don't need to be talking to them, regardless of your degrees. So we have to do a better job at filtering and being honest and open, right? With ourselves first. Because they know, these youngsters, they might be wild, but this is a smart age of youngsters. They know when you lying. They know when you don't care. They know when you there for a check. They know. And they going to handle you just like that. And I can't, and it's a special sauce to some of this. Because I come from them, so I don't even think in those terms. I tell them, give me the worst you got. My guys want the worst. We want them. Because we identify with them and we love them. And through grace, we was able to continue to be here, and we extend that grace to them. So without judgment, we focus on the why, not what you did, but why you even felt the desire to do it.
So what I want to do, Fred, is that I want to first thank you for coming on the program, man. You did a great job, man. You got us to some really good points. Again, we got our big summit coming up, and we love to make sure that you're there to kind of talk. We're going to bring everybody on, and we're going to do a panel discussion. We want anybody, if you have any questions or anything that you want to leave in the comments, please leave that in the comments. We'll get that over to Mr. Fred, and he'll be able to answer that questions. Also, there'll be links in our description where you can get more information about his organization and what Fred is doing. But right now, Fred, I'm going to let you have that camera. It belongs to you. I want you to take that for a few minutes to let people know anything that you want to say. But the part I really want to make that put out there is because I'm investing into a program that Fred is doing, this new building he wants to build on 105. And I believe that's his dream. And I'm from that community, and I'd love for him to try to get that, accomplish that as well. So I'm asking other folks to get involved with it. I'm going to put up there a link where you'll be able to see the actual building that Fred is attempting to build in the community, not attempting, the building that we're going to build in the community, and what he's going to do there, and also with links where you can get involved in trying to help us pull it off. We're at the beginning stages of that, and we're looking for as much help on financing and putting this program together. So Fred, I'm gonna turn that over to you.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I just, off the grid, my life has been just a series of hills and valleys, and I believe in people. I believe in change. I have seen myself change. And I believe as long as you are on earth, living and breathing, that you still have purpose. I'm a firm believer that nothing exists on this earth without purpose. You might not know what your purpose is, but when your purpose is over with, you will leave here. 8 months old, 88 years old. This is my firm belief. And so as long as I see people, I'm always trying to be authentic and share hey, my everyday challenges. Like, I'm a real person. I struggle, I get discouraged, but I guess for me, I believe wholeheartedly that a person will never work toward a better tomorrow if they don't feel that tomorrow will bring something better than they have right now. And that could be the rich or the middle class or the poor, right? And so because I believe so much that we can make a better Ohio, we can make a better Cleveland, I move in that vein all the time. Like, I got invited to a community cleanup that happened to turn out to be every Sunday now by some guys that, gang members that's trying to transform themselves and do the right thing. And I went, one, because my self-interest is in getting to as many people as possible and sharing the light, right? And so when I went there, I was like, wow, we cutting grass. We went to the 12 Angels, the spot where unfortunately Anthony Sowell had, murdered these beautiful sisters, right? And the city didn't do too well of a job looking for them. So we cut that area, and somebody was like, man, you can't cut that grass. The city will fine you. I was like, wow, well, this is what you call good trouble. We should take the fine then, because we're going to cut this grass and make this place nice, right? But the fact that somebody would think that, I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to continuously educate people on how not to, you understand, disengage from the political process, but to engage in it and feel full agency as you in it. And, you understand, empower people that are aligned with your self-interest and the self-interest of the city to do good. Because Cleveland can be a great place. We got work to do. And we're not going to do it in silos. We're not going to do it with this group that catered to city council, or this group that's cool with the mayor, or this nonprofit that, got access to capital and ain't going to touch it to the ground. There ain't none of that going to work. And we'll look up 5 years from now, and instead of having 395,000 residents, we'll have 200 and everything else. And how far we going to go? I say Cleveland can rise. And it's only going to rise when we rise ourselves beyond our own, individual accolades and interests to a combined shared interest that benefit the city of Cleveland and the neighborhoods and community as a whole.
We're going to leave a link in there where you can take a look at his dreams and also how you can get in touch, and if you'd like to play a role in helping us to pull this project off. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you the next show.